You just can't be afraid to bite a bat.
Rock this world! It's been a bit of a week for many people in the music scene, with Ozzy Osbourne's. Uh, I don't want to. I don't like the word death. I don't like the word death. But Ozzy Osbourne passed away. Very big icon. And I know, I believe it was in high school, your nickname was Ozzy. Was that literally related to, was that inspired by Ozzy Osbourne, or how did that come about?
Gosh, it was really silly because one of my first albums that I ever had was Paranoid, and so I'd gotten into Ozzy. In the sixth grade, you have a group of friends, you all have sort of a nickname, and that was kind of my nickname at the time, and that carried into high school. And I don't know, I've been looking around for my yearbooks so you could see people, writing out hags, Ozzy and that sort of thing. But yeah, I always liked Ozzy. I watched the Osbournes as a kid. I've always felt like he was a really real individual, just yelling and screaming and being an artist. And I connected to his lyrics kind of early on in life because they talked about the dark stuff that, you sometimes adults try and gloss over for kids. They don't want them to be exposed, or maybe just didn't have the language to really talk about it. But that's what music is for, right?
I agree. So I never latched on to Ozzy
Hmm.
specifically. I don't know if it was just like is it improper to ask how old you are, by the way?
Oh, not at all. Yeah, I'm a fully 36-year-old woman.
See, I'm 38, but for some reason I feel like I kind of somehow missed Ozzy. But my cousin is a big Ozzy fan. I think he's taking his death pretty hard right now. Obviously, there's so many people in our local music scene who've also been very vocal about the impact he had on them. So when you think about Ozzy and you think about his legacy, do you think there are lessons for what we're doing musically, or for how we're even like interacting with others, that we can kind of take away?
Yeah, definitely. I was actually surprised by how much people, cared. We had a lot of high profile passings, but this one, and maybe it's just because that's the corner of the scene that I'm in, it hit really hard. What lessons can we take from Ozzy? I think because he was so extreme, people got into that, especially here in Utah. My uncle, he was a metal drummer. He loved Kiss and Dream Theater and all this sort of stuff. So my cousins were really into metal, and I wanted to be cool like them, and keep up, with my cousins who were my first friends. And so I think there's a little bit of that like social mystery. We had Hot Topic, it was rebellion. And also Ozzy, I think after Black Sabbath went and just collaborated with a lot of different musicians in his solo scene, and kind of redefined himself. And I think that's what I take from it, is no matter what you're doing, you have to be you. Ozzy was Ozzy. Like, they had the Osbournes, they really created a brand. His lyrics are always, very, very honest, piercing, like critical. I mean, Into the Void is just, I don't think it gets more critical than that. Iron Man, Dave and I were jamming out on that earlier. These really intense themes. So I think just individuality is something to take. Like, I guess you just can't be afraid to bite a bat, whatever that means for your music career. Going out on a limb. And one of the toughest parts of being a musician for me is knowing when to play it safe and when not to. And I think Ozzy gives a lot of people permission to go there out on their ledge, whatever that is for them.
You mentioned Ozzy collaborating. I think that's actually also a really good takeaway as well. I sometimes wonder, like, if collaboration doesn't happen as much as it used to. The David Bowie and Trent Reznor, Ozzy with everyone. I don't know if just am missing those in my own life, in my own echo chamber, if that kind of stuff is still happening. But I think locally, I think collaboration and just this like connection and melding of different creative talents and ideas, that's a really great way to build and strengthen like connections in our local scene.
We have to understand too that in 2020 things got completely turned off. In Salt Lake, 10 years ago, there weren't really bars, there weren't a lot of venues that local musicians could play out. So it was very underground, and so people were driven into their cliques. The valley was a lot bigger than it used to be. Like, you'd never go to Ogden, you'd never talk to anybody from Ogden. Salt Lake and Ogden were very separate. Provo and Salt Lake were different universes. People from Bingham High might go to the Gateway Mall like once in a blue moon as a special occasion and not know what's going on. And so we're so much more connected. And then the pandemic happened and just drove everybody into their little bubbles. It'd take a while, I think, for me just being a fly on the wall in the scene to see the collectives, the small, little scenes, the punk scene, the straight edge scene, punk scene back in the day, the metal scene. Some of my first friends in music were from that more metal scene. Casey Frederick, who is our videographer, he's in a band called Principium, and he was kind of connected in this world that just seems so separate from the indie rock scene downtown at the Urban Lounge. But in any case, I'm seeing a lot of collaboration, actually. It's coming together. Like, speaking about the country scene, Morgan Snow, he has his whole suite of musicians. Sarah DeGraw, that whole area of musicians. They're always doing showcases together, doing big shows at the State Room, really drawing each other's crowds together to pack some of our larger independent venues. Recently, we saw Acacia Ridge collaborating with Sarah Gibson, which I thought was awesome, coming across. See Royal Bliss, they're always bringing in musicians. The guy from American Hitman's always playing with them. He's an awesome shredder. And they're always elevating young bands in the scene, just like us, getting them on stages. And I'm seeing more mixed bills, but it's tough. It's a tough sell. I think there's politics involved. If you have somebody featured on your song, all of a sudden there's all these questions. Just on the larger scale. And I think that's what set the precedent. You see the major music industry not collaborating as much over the last few years, whereas before everyone used to work together. And that's why it was so exciting to see Ozzy's last show, where he really brought the ends of the earth together on stage. They had Tool, they had, all these other people singing these Ozzy songs. And I think that as the music industry gets harder and more cutthroat, even for the big names, that you're going to see more people pulling together.
So you were talking earlier about how these disparate scenes like Ogden, Salt Lake, Provo, how they started coming together and how they're coming together again. I'm kind of curious what you think drives that connectivity, like how the actual like bands or scenes or venues contribute to this kind of melting pot, and what people can do to kind of build those bridges and make one larger scene.
It's a big goal of mine. When Dave and I started with Sweet J, I started just looking around. Back in the day, Facebook and social media, it was who you added and you would just see your friends, and I think it was easier to see what's going on. Now we have all sorts of junk, a lot of noise in the signal. And so people can just pay attention. That's why when I'm doing my Sweet J Instagram thing, I'm trying to put a lot of different corners of the scene in one place so everyone can see it. But ultimately, I think it's about the audiences. Anytime you do something, you have to ask yourself, like, what is my audience? And I think that's changed a lot in Salt Lake. We used to have a really young population. The average age in Utah was in the 20s, and people aren't having kids, or like the kids are moving further and further out. They don't have cars. They can't pop down to the Urban Lounge with their fake ID, like they used to. I don't know what kids were doing. I wasn't doing that. I was too much of a rule follower as a teen. But in any case, I think we just have to band together to find these new people. People are moving to Salt Lake from out of state, and they expect to be entertained, and it's not just going to be your friends at your show anymore. I think before, being in a band, based on what I saw growing up, was it's a way to hang out with your friends in your basement, have a basement show. People were drinking in their basements or doing whatever Mormons do. That's like drinking, but not, with their small community. It was a way to feel safe. And now I think we have access to so much more information. Being a band, the whole focus has shifted to communicating, to translating feelings about being in the community that you're in or excluded from whatever community. Like, there's a lot of frustrations as just the demographics just change and people are mixing together a lot more. And so bands are just going to have to work together. It can't just be you and your friends. You're going to have to meet some new people and put yourself out there and be a little bit more vulnerable. And I'm seeing that. Lots of mixed bills. When I first put in for the Velour Battle of the Bands, I wasn't even sure that Salt Lake bands played in that, you know? And I've been really working on trying to be an ambassador between those two scenes because the Velour needs our help. They are an independent venue, and Live Nation is coming for those venues. It's already got a lot of them. SNS is, moments from selling absolutely all the way out to some of those bigger promoters. We have a few independent promoters. Everybody just is going to have to band together between the cities because Smith Entertainment Group is coming. Our time could be over. California, I call them trust refugees. They're trying to do their thing in LA and now they're looking for a cheaper market. Like they're coming and they have advanced marketing skills to get over these social media hurdles to reach more of the fans. And some of the people that are on to your shows, they might have just gotten here from Tennessee. You have to think, what do they want? And they want different sounds, harder sounds, softer sounds. It's really exciting to see everything changing so quickly, but it's tough. Every show is a loss. It is a business trying to be in this music business, and I feel like I have to pay $500 to have a big, successful Cecret Souls show, and then I make that $500 just singing covers quietly in some coffee shop somewhere.
There are like two big tangents I want to go off from what you were saying. The first is you mentioned that it's not your friends anymore, it's new people. You gotta give them what they want, cultivate different sounds. I'm curious how that impacts your creativity or how you think it impacts creativity as an artist. Is there a balancing act between like being yourself and also like creating something kind of for more mass consumption?
It's funny because I did say you have to think about your audience, but what most people want is authenticity and vulnerability. I think in a lot of the music that I've seen, and I don't want this to come off as critical at all, but there is a provocore sound that a lot of the bands are going for, a formula. Even in the feedback that we got, really great feedback that we got at the Velour battle recently that we were a part of, to have dynamics, to have this, to have that, to have it feel a certain way. Even this interplay between having perfect drum sample sounds that are quantized versus, being more free form. And so I would say just stop copying each other. Just like try and find your own sound. Don't ask yourself what the regular norm is. Maybe think about what is going to set me apart rather than what's going to help me blend in to this sound that they want. It's tough too because before, especially a lot of the Spirit Machines music that we wrote before getting any attention or starting or setting any precedents, it was very self-discovery. It was very rock opera. We didn't even have a vision. We were just creating. Over the years, I've really been able to see like what's working, streaming, what's working live, what's working on the street corner, when Dave and I are playing acoustically. There's lots of different sounds, and I think all songs are tools, and when I get in front of an audience, I don't really like to make the set list ahead of time because I've got to see what's going on and what tool out of my toolbox is going to work here. Are there a lot of like ladies in the house? Maybe I need to pitch it to them. So it's not like I'm trying to fit into a different box. I'm just trying out a lot of different boxes, knowing that these days you have to be ready for all sorts of these different platforms. What's going to work in 3-second clips on Instagram. I'm like too much of a boomer to TikTok. I haven't quite gotten into there. I'm a little intimidated. But, that song that sounds really good in those little samples may not hit live. And so I just feel free to have lots of different things, but at the same time, we have been chasing that hit, kind of simplifying things, maybe not having so many wild interludes, to keep songs under 3 minutes, just to have something, especially as we're relaunching our new brand. The streaming algorithm is so mysterious. I don't even know if you can be directing for it, but you do see some people winning there, but that doesn't always translate to drawing a lot of people. You have to wear a lot of hats, and it's really overwhelming, honestly. So I would say just do what feels right to you, and then later see where it fits.
I think that's good advice. You mentioned you're doing coffee shop shows, you're doing big like $500 venues. How accessible is it for like a new artist or a small time band to actually perform these days? What are the best ways for them to do that or to like get their foot in the door? Because $500 is a lot.
I mean, you can start small. I see a lot of people railing against like exposure, like, well, they want me to play for exposure, but I think that exposure is 100% a currency that you can expect to be paid in. There are lots of different currencies. There's networking currencies, there's getting paid in money, there's exposure, there's experience, which is its own currency. And so you just have to diversify. For somebody just getting into it, gosh, unless you feel like you might die and you might just like straight up commit suicide unless you get these emotions off your chest, I don't know if I'd recommend doing it because you might want to go to college and study finance and marry somebody rich if making a lot of money and live in a lifestyle is what you want. Full disclosure, my parents are artists. Like my mom's a graphic designer, worked in marketing her whole life. My dad is a musician and an army guy. They told me absolutely not to do this. And they didn't let me. I had to go to college and go to graduate school and check off all of those boxes before I felt free enough to really jump in from a place where I have a day job and a resume that I can fall back on, and draw from. This is my time to do this. But for someone starting out, I think there's so much help now, and that's one of the things I strive to be. We're about to go into rock camp next week. There's the Spy Hop 801s that is really getting those tools in front of youngsters who have the time, who have the energy, who can find out how to make the moves now if they really do want to make this a career. To do it right, to avoid making mistakes. I talked to a young band and they were paying like $600 a month to somebody to manage them. I've thought about that a lot because I guess we're managing ourselves for free. Like what would that get you? And I think asking for help is totally appropriate. You want to put together a team of people who are all going to contribute and have really clear expectations and understandings of what your actual goals are. And I think that's the main thing is just to be clear about your goals. In Spirit Machines, they'd always be like, we're going to open for Tool. And obviously, I'd want to open for Ozzy. I dream even bigger. You have to be totally crazy to dream at all. But make small goals, start small. The Salt Lake Public Library, that was one of my first shows that I got. And, they have this library series. There's so many small music series that's looking out for new talent to help them build their experience. What you don't want is to succeed too fast and be on a big stage and not be prepared for it and then get discouraged, And so dreaming big, setting smart goals, and just having a good team and not being afraid to ask for help. If somebody asked you for help, would you help them?
I would probably relish the opportunity because it's generally a good opportunity to test your skills, level up your skills. If I have the bandwidth, absolutely. So you're doing this as your day. This is your day job?
No, no. So I have a whole day job. I sell stuff. Yeah, I travel. I travel a lot, just in Montana and Utah and Idaho. But when we started this band, I was in graduate school, so I was like kind of a student, a working student, doing it kind of in my spare time. And with Dave, this is like kind of his full-time gig. So I had the privilege of having somebody who was focused on it full-time and just who has 20 years of experience pushing things forward back when he was in Boston. And so we run things together. Everybody has their specific skill. I wish that we had an accountant on our team. What I will say, Dave's a sound guy. I think that helps a lot, especially since I had to grow a lot as a vocalist, singing over a band, going into a live sound environment. We were saying the skills. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like there are a lot of skills to learn. There's a lot of mistakes to make, and I don't think you can learn unless you're making the mistakes often and early.
Speaking not of mistakes necessarily, but just of you in general, we actually haven't really gotten an actual introduction of you. Tell us a little about yourself, especially as it relates to like the Utah music scene, um, and what you are doing now, musically.
So I'm from Salt Lake. I grew up looking at the Dead Zephyr, looking at the Dead Goat Saloon. I was kind of a latchkey kid. I always wanted to be in a band, but couldn't really afford lessons. I was in choir in high school. I was very shy. The big band in high school, it used to be called The Fray, but they got a cease and desist, and so they changed it to La Fray. They played this Battle of the Bands at the Salt Lake Public Library, and I just thought it was so cool. And so then was on my science mission, went to school, did all these things. Music was on the ultimate back burner. I wasn't performing or playing at all. And then I was in Boston out there for school, and they had Berklee College of Music. Everybody was amazing, and they had kind of a different attitude out there. Like, instead of feeling discouraged, like, oh, you're not at Berklee. I didn't feel as much gatekeeping. I felt a lot of like welcoming of like, well, why don't you do this? Like, you could do that. Like, a lot of why not you attitude. And so I started practicing, 15 minutes a day, and found out that that's how you get good, is just consistent practice. I was working in a lab, so I'd be alone at all night running these experiments, and I was just playing and writing. So when I got back to Salt Lake in 2014, I started going to open mics. When I started going to the open mics, I just had this like weird moment when I first signed up, where I chose my stage name. I had always imagined that I would have this daughter named Pepper, and she would do all these things and do all those things. And at that point, I was like, I don't know why I'm waiting. Like, I could just be doing those things. And so I wrote Pepper Rose down because I always kind of hated my name. So I just started performing, doing stuff, playing library shows, making my neighbors be in a band with me. There's this horrible video that's out there somewhere of me with my neighbors doing Smells Like Teen Spirit. I used to be like mortified by it. And looking back on it now, I was like, man, that's how you start, is at cringe, full cringe. Then I met Dave, and we got into Spirit Machines, had a pretty like meteoric implosion of that project. And so now that we're rebranding as Cecret Souls, it's interesting. Before, I'd kind of taken a really passive stance in it. I'd never imagined that I'd perform or be in a band at all, ever. And so all of a sudden it was happening as Spirit Machines. It happened so quickly. And it was easy to just let the guys with their egos drive things forward, be like, we're gonna be like signed, and we even almost like signed a record contract, and they just never paid us. I have a song that says, have some faith in your failures. They've carried you all this way, and that was a big stressful failure that kind of broke things apart. But in any case, now that we go forward as Cecret Souls, I'm trying to take more responsibility of what I want, not just lay back and let other people run the show, especially when they're, as delusional as any musician is. Sure, we're gonna open up for Tool one day. We have our little accolades, but mostly I'm trying to make it as fun as possible. This time that we have in our lives, this is it. I want to enjoy singing. I want to enjoy writing new songs. I want to enjoy being a part of this local music scene, being a helping hand to others, and also collaborating. We're always bringing out-of-state musicians, trying to connect with people out of state. More and more people are touring here. It's really cool to see local bands on big touring bills opening. I'm just trying to stay grounded, but also push forward. We're trying new marketing strategies, getting on podcasts like this, talking about it.
I'm not sure this is the podcast for growing your audience, but maybe fingers crossed it'll blow up. That'd be awesome.
You never know. It's funny, my neighbor, so when I first moved back to Salt Lake, I lived in this neighborhood with a bunch of violin makers, and it was cool just to understand the music business from an instrument standpoint. But I had this neighbor, and she was a young girl, and she had gone viral putting forward a cover of A Bag of Hammers by Tao and the Get Down, Stay Down. And that was my first just introduction of like what it was to go viral or like be in the social media market. And she was a young mother just doing it. And I was just watching her. She moved to LA to try and be a model. She was kind of hippie Salt Lake style, and she had like brushed all of her dreads out and really tried to fit into that mold, and it was going nowhere. And then she just reverted back to who she always was, like this hippie Salt Laker chick. And then she started absolutely blowing up. And Shannon Blake is now one of the most successful independent musicians out there. just doing it, and she catches a lot of hate, a lot of love, like whatever it is. And so I've seen it happen. Anything could happen, especially if you keep at it and don't let all the negativity get to you. Never be surprised when you succeed or when you fail, because failure is a big part of it. They say the monkeys with the typewriters. At least one of those times it might be Shakespeare. You just don't know. The world's a wild place. I guess what I'm saying is that there's a pathway for it. I'm always looking for people who are on that pathway, seeing what are they doing? What risks are they taking? And what you'll find in all of them is that they're staying true to who they are. And that was what drove their success, and just staying on their grind. It's a lot of work. It's not going to happen overnight.
I agree. You mentioned that you guys are trying some like new social media or marketing strategies.
Hmm.
I'm curious, like, do you have any takeaways regarding marketing for
Oh yeah.
music and bands?
Yeah, I loved your article on marketing. I was reading it because it is like this secret, mysterious thing that I think is one of the biggest stumbling blocks for local musicians in Utah. And I don't know if it's from kind of this culture that we live in where conformity kind of was key for a long time. Fitting in with your community, following a certain set of values. Even in your rebellion, there's a certain set of values that the punks stand by, some codes. And one of those codes across it, whether you're LDS or not, is that sticking your head up above the things and trying to be better than that is bad. Trying to be special, being seen, trying. It's kind of embarrassing. I think people feel really ashamed of putting themselves out there because they don't want to be perceived as full of themselves, or the people who are full of themselves have no qualms at all and get on everyone's nerves. It's a fine line. And so for me, I'm trying to give myself permission to stand up there, to be the focal point of our project. In the past, as far as marketing goes, our drummer, he was a conversion focused marketing expert. So when our Zober video was shared by Tool, he was ready with a conversion funnel through our website to drive people in. When as soon as they get in the funnel, they can just buy the CD or maybe be upsold to the t-shirt or to like larger fandom products, fan clubs, different kind of marketing structures. And that was really successful. Sorry. Roger is.
I love that cap.
Oh yeah, this is Roger Clemens. He's like, no one's paying attention to me. Yeah, marketing is boring. I know. This is the thing. People just want to rock, and these days now you have to do all this marketing stuff or have a manager that you're paying $600 to do that. And back when we started, the Google Pixel and different marketing things had unfettered access to all of your data. On Facebook, you can go in and see what your marketing categories are. And I went in there one time, and one of the categories was dates Pisces, because all of my partners have been like Pisces, and I have a lot of friends that are Pisces.
That's the crazy scary thing about data. Everyone thinks that your phone is listening to you, but it's not. It just really understands either what your community around you is doing and what you are doing.
It's very granular. But then the big giants went at it and they limited what the advertising could really reach. And so it really broke a lot of our ads, which were targeting people who really wanted to hear our music. And that's my pitch for getting over that. Like, oh my gosh, I'm putting myself out there. I'm as mortified as anybody that all of my friends, all of the local bands are seeing these ads. I'm sure they're tired of it, but it's not for them. We amassed this list of fans from all over the country, even internationally, who really wanted to hear the music, the specific message, and, become super fans. Like, the internet will find you your people. It's not for your neighbor, and you just have to get over it. Barbara might see the ads and judge you, but at the same time, like, you're going to find these fans, but they limited it. They kind of broke it, and that was really discouraging. For a while, we kind of had to rethink it, and we were driving them towards physical sales of CDs. We probably sold like 5,000 CDs. I was packaging those, and it was becoming a nightmare. Dave and I were spending hundreds of hours packaging. We were irritating the post. We were having to become friends with the post office. They're like, you need a scan sheet. And now we're having to buy this infrastructure, for actually getting these things out. And so that was a lot of work. Like, I love making CDs. I love printing art. And I hand printed a lot of the t-shirts. We were keeping costs down. But meanwhile, back in the day, we had a friend, his name Damask. And he had this strategy to just direct people towards streaming. And now he has, a bunch of passive income, and millions of listeners. And so we're maybe going to focus in that direction. It's tough because streaming royalties aren't that much. All this sucks because it's just boring. Like, I've never gone onto the Spotify and felt the rush that I do on stage. Usually you're just like, why isn't this working? But do a viral. We launched this music video and we only have so many views. There's a lot of disappointment and nerves, and just like the metrics can make you feel really insecure and despondent. Like, does any of this matter? Like, what is this for? So we're just trying to focus on expanding our audience, finding the new fans, different marketing strategies. That's going to dictate your audience. Like, we were really popular on Facebook. Most Facebook users are like kind of older people. Those are our Spirit Machines fans. Like, they're older people, they're rural people, that liked going to a website. Whereas, like, my little brother, he works in military recruiting, and he's telling me that teens don't even write emails. Everything is touch based. They don't know about typing. If you want younger fans, you're going to have to think about what they are doing, and I don't know what they're doing. We might have to hire a teen manager.
I can give you some pointers. They're very generalized, so they're not necessarily that great or that
Oh,
deep,
yeah.
but like absolutely TikTok and
Yeah.
video in general, very, very video focused. One great way to engage with new audiences is to do things like TikTok challenges. I don't know about the conversion, but if you're at least working on video and like interacting in these new ways that Gen Z does, definitely you'll at least start to understand and connect better with those audiences.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, that's stuff that I've seen and I understand, but I haven't actually necessarily dove into or done myself. So that's why it's kind of surface level advice.
I think you're totally right in cutting things up. Before, we were making like super intense music videos, movies based on like the Catch 22 video. We probably spent like $10,000 on that. And it was fun. That was something that I wanted to do always, make a movie. Now we're refocused on what can we do with little things. And this $500 we talked about spending on live shows, it's like if we're on a cool stage, then we're making sure that we're getting content, having photographers, but that requires me to be like camera ready and
Yep.
and vulnerable, putting myself out there. I went on TikTok and I was looking into the viewfinder, looking at myself. It's got all these tools on there, and all of a sudden I can say whatever I want. And for me, coming from this old school of thinking a lot about what other people think, thinking about getting unbrainwashed from conformity, that gave me pause. And I was like, man, I got to do a lot of soul searching to figure out how I can get over the squeamishness of being visible. And one of those is just knowing that people want to see somebody or something that resonates with them, and you don't know until you get there. I've watched Die Shiny. They even went to a creators kind of academy. I recommend that you have them on your show because they have a lot to say about marketing, and they've utilized a lot of programs and help to get to where they're at. And I watch a lot of what they're doing, and they found a huge community on TikTok that they didn't know was out there. And so I'm hoping to find that and to figure out how to get the executive functioning so I can respond to messages and really engage in that way, because I'm old school. I had CDs and AOL.
Are you familiar with Salduro, the band?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So they released an album, Instagramophone, 9 1-minute songs that like created a perfect square reels on their Instagram profile. Something I think they should have done that they didn't would have been to create like 9 1-minute music videos.
Yeah.
I think that could have worked really well. And I think that was a very creative and honestly brilliant thing to do. The way we interact with music now, albums are honestly meaningless. Almost everything goes on a playlist. It's like song by song. If I did like a full-length album, like concept albums, that would be solely for me. I don't even know if anyone would actually listen to it in order these days. Sorry, that was getting off on a tangent, but that was kind of something I was thinking about as we were talking about reels and marketing tactics and stuff.
Oh, I remember that Seldura album, and I thought that that was really cool because for me, I can't even tweet because anything I want to say is like longer than 130 characters. I'm still struggling at being concise and getting away from that concept album modality. And that's tough because I love albums. Like, I listen to albums. That's how I listen. I'm trying to get out of the box. I'm trying to have more to consume when it comes to music to kind of draw people in. One of my friends, her name's Stephanie Espinoza. She was studying photography when I was kind of getting into all of this, and her photos were not subjective. They weren't of things. It wasn't a pretty picture of things. It was about the process of how people were experiencing photos. So she was obscuring photos, like having people having to look through, prisms at the photos, and she had this concept of slowing down the consumption of photos. And I've always thought back to that. How can I get creative about this, get people to listen in a different way? Even our mashup Zober was just a way to get people thinking, surprise people. We're trying to move away from being a one-trick pony in that respect and doing some different things. But yeah, 1 minute videos, different things. I'm gonna go from here to a little video shoot. We're doing a lot more video shoots, having content creation days, having lots of different outfits ready to mix it up, make sure that it looks good. We've definitely experimented with iPhone cam versus like fancy cam, what people respond to music wise. And so we're going to do a green screen kind of thing and maybe let people choose their own background. People are doing all sorts of crazy stuff on their phone. I want to have competitions. I love raffles, stuff like that. It's just about getting the bandwidth. That was such a monumental effort to get the new foundation laid for the new brand, even just to decide what the new name was going to be and just to begin, I don't know if you've ever been like writing a big thing and then your computer crashes and you have to start over. That's a weight that you have to lift. But now that we're there, we've got some momentum. I'm going to start just going off on a limb, seeing what I can do just with all of our different tools. I want to make a zine. I want to get tapes back out, get something physical that people can hang out with while watching the digital medium.
And honestly, it sounds like with some of the things you were saying, like the competitions, the green screens, the ways you're thinking about how you can get people to interact digitally. I think you'll do great on TikTok, honestly.
Yeah.
You mentioned just a minute ago you're going to do this video work. You have like an upcoming album, right? 16-ish songs you're trying to pare down.
Yeah, we're trying to pare them down. I think we're just going to launch one at a time, but we might do a pre-sale of the whole album to just get things going. We've been in the investment phase for so long that it's getting critical. I was like, oh my gosh, we need to get some capital together if we're going to sell vinyl and all of that boring money stuff that I hate. But yeah, we're getting really excited. Some of these songs Dave and I have been writing since like 2020. So I'm excited to get them out. New things are coming together. We have some new covers in store, some new surprises. So we're almost there, but yeah, these days you can't just have the song done. You got to have the video done, and you have to have a plan on the rollout and all of these things.
Because you have so much content, how do you kind of pare down? Like, do you have a process for figuring out what will make the cut versus what might not?
I think it comes down to what goes with what. I think, some things will get saved for later. It's hard to know what to put out first because you don't know what's going to hit. Do you put out your best hit hopeful first and then not have a bunch of other stuff for people to listen to if they're interested? Or do you risk putting out your B-sides first and then nobody's interested until the hit, and so then you're discouraged or not making momentum? For me, it's been trying to figure out what cover can we co-release. What's the right bite-size release? Is it 1 track? Is it 3 tracks? I just don't know. The whole system is an upset right now with all the AI stuff. Also, people get on playlists. Do you want to release it in enough time to get on the playlist? We kind of like to release things right away because we're reckless.
That's kind of been my modus operandi too. I try to at least do a week out because DistroKid tells me that can increase the chance of being on a playlist. But if I could, I'd release it next day. And honestly, it should probably be a month out. That's probably what I should try and do in the future.
I've heard that, but that's so just excruciating considering we've been waiting years. We'll see. We're gonna try and time things like that and getting these videos done. Yeah, all the nuts and bolts of it. It's fun to talk about these things. Bands stick with like, oh, coming soon or some sort of mystery, but I don't know. These days I think people love the process. It's like the a get ready with me. I'm seeing a lot of that paradigm. Detsani, she's another artist kind of on the rise. She very much does that. She shows off her studio space and talks about the process. I think that people respond to that.
My guitarist Nettie is really good about this. She will record like practices or like do like reels or snapshots from when we're actually practicing. And that is stuff I need to be doing as the one doing most of the marketing. So I really appreciate when she does that because it's what people like to see. And it's honestly more authentic than the coming soon thing. It's just, this is where we're at. This is what we're doing. I'm not sure when we'll release, but here's a look at how things are coming along. So, which is kind of also my modus operandi for not having a put together plan of when a release is going to happen. So that's awesome that you're doing that and thinking about that.
Thinking and doing are two different things. I know what I should be doing. I'm trying to be the content person because what I've found is that you have the creator and then you have the executor. I used to be a part of a student group. My co-chair, she would write these emails and I would send them, because I'm good at interfacing with people and she just wants stuff to get done. One thing that I see bands do, and it seems to be working to a certain extent, is this content that doesn't even involve your music. Making memes, making comedy videos. There's a couple bands out there, No Such Animal and Ideal Horizon. They're making funny videos, promoting the process, or just influencing in ways. There's some other strategies like, oh, you finally found your favorite artist, but you didn't know it yet. Or, oh, you found an artist that's still going to respond to your messages. That I don't see working as much, but sometimes I feel like maybe that's my boomer mind not getting it. It's just interesting to see other people and what they're trying. And for me, I'm going to do what I can do. That's all you can do. Do what you can when you can until it can be full time. And then who knows what those bands do. I don't see a lot of content from full time bands. The Backseat Lovers aren't sitting around making content, are they?
I actually have no idea. That's a good question. That's another problem. I don't think I've ever seen anything from Backseat Lovers. No, I said Backstreet Lovers. I've heard of them only because I put together a like well-known Utah bands list. It makes me curious. You've mentioned several bands that I'm just like, who are they? And it does kind of speak to the fragmentation and echo chambers we all find ourselves in, and trying to figure out how to kind of cross those barriers.
One of my pipe dreams is to have the local. Oh my god! Sorry, just ghosts.
Cats being cats or ghosts being ghosts, even better.
Yeah, one of my pipe dreams is to open the local music shop. We have the heavy metal shop, we have Raunch Records, we have some places where people are finding out. We have Aces High, we have Mark of the Bistro, we have some of these satellite organizations, but they're very much stuck in their things, and I don't know if they do a good job of promoting local music in the way that I want to do. Diabolical Records, they do a little bit of that, giving away tickets, but they're still in their little clique. When I'm on my Sweet J page, I'm really trying to find and see all the different bands out there because I think we could change the culture. Right now, everybody staying in their little clique is making sure that the culture at large is still thinking that they gotta go to Twilight concert series, pay $250 to go see Modest Mouse, in order to have fun. Whereas Pibbs Exchange is making bank selling Pink Floyd t-shirts and that sort of thing. If we could raise the profile of local musicians, imagine a Pibbs Exchange where it's all local band tees. It's where the teens are going to find out about local bands, and that's what's cool, and we could get there, but people have got to stop being so afraid to say the wrong thing to the wrong person. I've put my foot in my mouth in so many places. I've gotten shushed at the Velour. I understand why people stay inside their comfort zones, with their friends' bands. I'm not harshing on anybody. I'm just saying I want to have the local music fest, and I see it coming together. We're almost at critical mass, but it's going to take some time.
Jeff Dylan did this thing called Hometown Theory a
Yeah.
few years ago, which was freaking awesome.
Yep.
So tell me about Sweet J.
Oh yeah, so we used to have the physical place where we'd have bands play, and it's beautiful because the location now is Chapel Brewing, and we just played a Pine Beer Fest there too, and I was like, man, they're realizing the vision. We didn't have the money or the business acumen to stay in business over there, but essentially what that is I have trained my algorithm to only show me local music. And because it's crazy, and Instagram unfollows people constantly. They want you to stay in their rut of like what they think, what they're pushing, but you can fight back. You can say I'm not interested in this. You can interact with content that you like. I'll go maybe through 100 scrolls before it starts sponsoring content from like, oh, you like bands, maybe out of state bands, and I'll stop. Even for me, where I'm proactively doing this, I get stuck in maybe 100 bands because there are hundreds and hundreds of local bands right now. There's new
Yeah.
bands, there's established bands, there's Orem bands. And so what I'm trying to do is be a place where if somebody wants to figure out what they're doing on Friday night, they can go and look in the stories and maybe find something new that they haven't seen. And I try and stay focused on female fronted bands. Like it's my profile, so I can do what I want with it. And I feel like a lot of the powers that be are, no offense to dudes, but you have what you see, and I'm trying to be someone that sees all these female fronted bands and puts them out more. We did have the Kilby Block Party, but SNS has its list of like 8 darlings that it focuses on, which is
Yeah.
totally fine.
Yeah.
That's a legitimate community, and they are curating their brand. That's totally fine. Hometown Theory was awesome. Unfortunately, we lost Beancat to Austin.
This is something I hate about being up in Logan is I do feel really disconnected from it all. Like I maybe got to see like 2 or 3 shows that she put on, if even that. So I really applaud your effort to have a place where everyone can see and engage with the local music in a much more comprehensive and holistic way.
I mean, mostly I just was tired of social media and my stream just being filled with stuff that was making me feel bad. I was like, if I'm going to be addicted to my phone, how can I make it as positive as possible? And I'm seeing bands just put so much effort and money into this content. And so if I see something that has cool content, I'll put it in the story and share it to my story so that maybe it can reach a wider audience. Logan's got some cool stuff. I didn't know that you were in Logan.
Huh.
Lindy, she's got the woodsy artsy cafe
Yeah, yeah,
that she's starting. You guys had the really crazy Y Sound drama.
yeah.
You have the Cache. That's been an awesome place that we played a bunch. Things are happening up there. I try and share stuff up there and in the Ogden scene just to reach more people wherever they're at. I live in West Valley, and it is tough to do that 30-minute drive into downtown to see shows. So
Yeah.
sometimes Instagram is the only place that I get to see any of this local music stuff. I travel a lot. I can't go to a lot of shows, unfortunately.
I totally get that. I do wish I could get down to Salt Lake more. I did want to mention one thing because you kind of brought it up, talking about, focusing on femme-fronted bands. And one of the first thoughts that came into my mind when I was even considering doing a podcast, I had a friend, brilliant like artist, and she once remarked, does the world really need another male podcaster? That makes a lot of sense. I agree. And I am trying to be very thoughtful of like potential guests. And I'm definitely trying to make sure it's at least like 50% man, woman, non-binary, and like just kind of very much balancing and being not what I am.
Well, don't be ashamed. It's tough, and this is a tough thing, and I'm always trying to be an ambassador, especially in today's like wild political climate of like, what's the right way to create equity? Like, are we doing away with that and that? And for me, I think that part of what's missing in all of this, and this is an unpopular opinion, I would say is praise for guys, white guys who are doing it right, doing a good job. But for me, being a scientist, like a person of color, like if it weren't for those dudes, like I've had mentors who go out of their way to see me, to help me elevate, and in this world that's, dominated by men, those are the ones who are handing down, and that's really important. I think that it takes a mix of all people, and people to just get over squeamishness of interfacing, of this fear of saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing, and letting that, keep them from maybe reaching out to somebody who's different. Sometimes those interactions are tough. There's a lot of women who don't want to hear anything from a man. Like, they're over it, and I can imagine that might be really tough to push through. You know what I mean? I think a lot of people who try and have good intentions feel kind of rebuffed because it's not immediately, oh, thank you, or these people who are usually marginalized maybe have a chip on their shoulder. It's really tough to interact. And with LDS, bands and non-LDS bands, I see a big rift there where historically things were contentious. Now we're trying to build bridges, but if you want to bring the scenes together, you can't be like ragging on the Mormons constantly. You kind of have to be accepting. It's a tough thing, but for me, I just do it because when I first was in the scene, I didn't see a lot of women in the scene, and it made it tough. And I had a lot of tough interactions. I mean, like, I am a salesperson in a rural, it's my job to push through those difficult interactions. I might be the first Black person that anybody's talked to, and they're fucking afraid. I can see it, the fear in their eyes, and maybe I'm not in a good mood that day. And so I'm like leaning into some stereotypes, but it's on both of us. And I really push through those difficult interactions because once that person sees, hey, I'm actually here to be your friend, then they're not so on edge. I'm not so on edge, sticking with things that we have in common. And we're seeing a lot of mixed bands now, bands that have women in them, different things. But yeah, I'm just trying to make sure that female bands, especially ones that are just starting out, are visible so that people just have less fear of getting into there. If I hadn't had Leah from the Dead Zephyrs being my friend, or Chandra from Ginger and the Gents, who we're playing with on the 8th at Ice House, to kind of hand over some of the critiques that maybe I can't hear from a guy. They're saying, like, you gotta be louder, or you gotta do this, or just to bridge the gap, or say you're not alone. That really helps me feel more confident of getting on stage and pushing through those tough moments with the sound guy, or going into Aces High at first, which was a really scary environment for me. I didn't know if I was going to be accepted. People come off as intimidating and then are mad when people are intimidated.
I'm curious as to your thoughts on, is the world today, our social media, 24-hour news cycles, do you feel like it is harder for people to make mistakes and harder for them to have redemption or forgiveness? I'm thinking specifically of cancel culture here, but I'm kind of curious, since we kind of broached that topic a little in what you were saying. I'm curious what your observations and thoughts have been.
This is a big one, and I think it is a big barrier to the scenes kind of interfacing, and just some of the difficulties that bands have as you raise your profile. And I think people are afraid to make mistakes because they're so visible. And I'm always of the mind that there's got to be a way back. You talk about redemption, talk about apologizing. That's a theme that we're exploring in a song that we have called Salem, where I talk about apologies, because apologies can go a long way. And especially observing the Y sound situation, I thought that was a really interesting case study in what's going on, where before we were having a certain culture. Now our norms have changed. Now it's no longer, especially with alcohol being involved. And this is a big problem with music in general, is that in order to make money, we're out here selling alcohol. Opportunities to make money as a band that don't involve alcohol sales are limited. And I'm pushing for that to change. I've talked to mayors about it. It's one of my platforms. But I think that addressing that, White Sound put out a statement saying we're going to think about these things and take it into consideration. And while that doesn't erase like the hardships that people who are having bad times, making lots of mistakes on both sides are experiencing on both sides. Traumatic thing happens to you, you might live with that for the rest of your life. But people who are making mistakes, uh, feeling guilty, suffering with shame, being ostracized, those are consequences of their actions, which maybe they need to think harder about. But that's still part of the mental health picture that I think gets missed in cancel culture, because hurt people hurt people. So, we have to have kind of a way to address that. And I think apologizing could go a long way. Self-forgiveness is really a really big thing that I think we're still learning as a society, especially when everything is so visible. So I don't know. I think we're all learning to navigate that, and I think we have to be willing to have conversations and be willing to admit when we made mistakes, and that's really tough.
I think that's a big one. Like three core things that I look for and suggest others do anytime they make mistakes. One thing I like to try and separate is that bad actions do not equal bad people. And it's really important that we remember that people are people. They are fallible. I'm obviously not condoning or trying to forgive any sort of sexual misconduct or anything of that nature, but it is important to remember that people are people, and like bad actions do not mean that they are bad or that they necessarily had bad intentions. So the three things I try to look for and tell others to do is, one, obviously apologize, admit your wrongs, don't make excuses, actually give a sincere and contrite apology and understand what you're actually apologizing for. Be sincere in not wanting to do it again. Actually learn from your mistakes. Tell people that you are not going to do this again. And then more specifically, detail how you're going to ensure you're not going to do it again. Like whether something systemic in your processes have to change, something in your behavior has to change, and how you're going to actually change that behavior, whether that's like therapy or coaching or something. But yeah, so I think those three things: apologize, promise not to do it again, and then show how you're not going to do it again. And I think that goes a long way to forgiveness, like for other people forgiving you, and hopefully for you forgiving yourself, I think, because I really think that shows your intentions, your desire to improve and be a better person. And I at least hope that people see that, because I know I have messed up tons in my life, and if there's no way to come back from that, yeah, that would suck. That'd be very scary.
Yeah, yeah, and I love that you're being honest about it, because I think honesty and self-awareness is a big part of it. And that's the thing that some people aren't going to get there until they get therapy. That's an important part of it. And that takes time, and unfortunately everything's moving at the speed of light. And so I liked what the wise sound statement said, is that we're going to take some time and understand this. Because I don't know yet is a fine, but I'm finding taking steps to find out is a great first step. Everybody did make mistakes. I've made mistakes. I've offended friends, done things, I'm not proud of. And I think having leadership in that is really important. One thing is Cecret Souls was getting rebuilt because a lot of what kind of drove the old band apart was that it was a toxic relationship. People were resentful. Things, got out of control in a lot of different situations, and it was tough to come back from that. And some relationships need to end. Some people aren't the right person for you, isn't bringing out the best in you. And so I think that, as you're saying, making these statements, having a plan for how you're going to change is, sometimes you just have to be real about who you are and know, I can't be in that environment, so I'm not going to put myself in that environment anymore. And it's really, really tough. And I think you also just have to know yourself and know that not everybody is going to understand. Everyone's understanding can't necessarily be your goal, because no one can really understand. And so you got to take the steps that make sense for you. Like for me, I can't even go into a guitar store. If I touch a guitar that I like, I might buy it, and I'm broke as hell right now. So I just have to be real and not go there. I might have someone else drop my amp off if it needs to get fixed. And I also knew that I couldn't be around those people anymore. And that's really tough. And it's tough because one of the roles I have to be responsible for is the bad guy. And I think that's where some people really struggle, is they don't want to be the bad guy. they don't know when they're being the bad guy. I think being able to say, like, hey, whether it's right or wrong, like, we got to take steps for it to not happen again is really, really just important. And not everybody has that maturity level. It's really tough. A lot of people come to the music scene because they're hurting. A lot of mistakes happen when people are under the influence and don't have a lot of control. And I think as the local music scene is integrating into this new mixed environment of transplants, I think that everyone's going to have to take a look at their substance use, at their coping mechanisms. You know, one of your questions, I really appreciated this, is saying, where do you find Cecret Souls in this, like, super counterculture? I'm going super hard against the norms. You know, nothing matters. Anything that has the word values in it is something I'm rebelling against. That's over here. And then there's like goody two shoes, you know, like we're not even showing our shoulders. And I asked myself, should I be showing my shoulders at the velour? I don't know. You know, like I'm trying to respect their norms. I don't understand them, but I'm trying to walk this line. And one thing that really broke Spirit Machines up is that alcohol, substance abuse was a factor. It was in these scenes that we were part of. It was in the band. It was affecting things. And for me, the 5 people that you spend the most time around, that's who you are, you know? And we kind of have a responsibility for what those around us are doing. As we go forward with this apology, everyone in that Y Sound community had to ask themselves what their role was when they didn't listen or didn't care or didn't want to get into it or didn't have time for that or didn't want to embarrass somebody or whoever. You know, for me, I had to ask myself, like, is this who I want to be? Is this the band that I want to be? And unfortunately, like, somebody lost their life because of drunk driving. And so now as we go forward, I really have to think about what my relationship to alcohol is, even as we're going to go to Ice House. I have to ask myself, who am I letting drive into the night? It's really tough because I don't always get to be the good guy. Sometimes being a good guy to myself looks like being the bad guy to some other people. And having that bravery, that's the other side of people who, you said you made mistakes, apologize. Well, I've watched some mistakes happen and didn't speak up, and so I'm trying to soul search and figure out where my place in that is. You know, I don't want to go around judging everybody, but at the same time, if we're going to have a functional music scene, then we're going to have to get real, and know that we're not just in some dark corner, you know, being on SLC punk, you know, drinking away our potential. You know, we have to be more working within the system, Stevo. And that's a tough sell for a lot of people, I think.
I did a lot of soul searching when the Y Sound stuff happened because it's just like, what did I miss? How did I contribute to what happened? Was I not listening to people I should have listened to? Were there signs before that this was happening or building? And then going back to the whole alcohol thing, I think maybe this is just my bias as someone who, you know, grew up Mormon and then left the church. I feel like part of the reason alcohol is so intertwined with, especially I think the harder the punk scenes, is because it's a strong counterculture. It's a reaction to the dominant culture, and especially when people, you know, leave the church, they want to do everything they couldn't do, not just to rebel, but just because they need to find out. They need to understand. When you haven't had role models that show healthy drinking or things of that nature, it leads to some very bad things. And so I think part of the alcohol issue is intertwined with just that counterculture as a whole. But I didn't even think about the fact that a lot of the venues are bars these days. Like, yeah, most things are bars. That's it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and it's tough, and you know, it kind of drives a wedge between the two scenes as well, you know, and that's tough because in order to be successful as a musician, you have to have your shit together. You know, you're doing a bunch of stuff, and so I think as we're going forward, I love that we're finding out that values are okay, that community is okay. I didn't grow up LDS. I was just here and wasn't LDS, you know, so that wound isn't my lived experience, but I know that it's a big part of people's identity, and having this new music scene that isn't about that identity, you know, this new paradigm of being a musician, that identity is a big part of, but now we're also trying to work towards these goals, finding new values, saying it's okay to drink a little bit. I've seen straight edge people go all the way off the other side of the map, and I don't know what their problem is. They get all violent. Everyone's gonna have their crutch, and I think being able to communicate about it and just be accountable as a community and have this new code of values that's somewhere in the middle of that is going to be the key. And it's tough because this cancel culture, it's so easy to vilify one person. They're the bad one, and like you said, we're all in this community together. It's not always as black and white, but then it's tough. I was recently reading about Justin Roiland. I'm a huge Rick and Morty fan. And without him, the show is just not funny at all. And it is a loss that I'm grieving. And I wanted to know how bad he was, and when I read the details, it was really bad. And it really challenged my, there always has to be a way back narrative, because I was like, man, some of this is really tough. Our community is going through this series of public witch hunts that's going on right now. And it's tough because we have our president also modeling this very public behavior of calling each other out. And there's people on all sides, and there are consequences, but reintegration is important. Some of it's going to have to be a case by case basis, but I just don't know. We're just finding a way. It's tough. Things are changing real quick right now, and we just have to keep the dialogue open, I think.
I agree. Anything you want to say before we end this discussion?
I guess just check out Cecret Souls. My dad would be on me if I didn't promote the thing. He's always making sure, you always have to have someone in your corner giving you the extra push to do the stuff that's hard for you. So yeah, check out Cecret Souls. We're going to be releasing new music, and just get out to a local show. Challenge yourself, or just give yourself permission to just consume online. We can't be everywhere at once. And so whatever method of consumption feels right to you, I encourage that. So just have fun with it and just enjoy this moment of the Utah local music scene. I think we're on our way to becoming a really serious market, and it's your chance to get in on bands when they are just starting. And that's really exciting.
Hell yeah. Thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it. It has been a pleasure talking with you.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Casey. I really appreciate your thoughtful questions and your commitment just to the local scene and willing to get into the nuts and bolts.